3, 2, live.
You're now watching two old farts making noises.
Hey, welcome to the Remote Show with Michael Maturo.
You must be calling as you've heard about our new web app launch. We're pretty excited about it too. Leave us your name, number, and the best time to call, and we'll follow up and answer any inquiries you may have. Have a great day.
All right. Welcome to the Remote Show, episode 100 for
That is true.
the Two Old Farts Making Noises. So congratulations, gentlemen, on the 3
Thank you.
Thank you very
Michael.
much. And it's almost catching up to our ages. So we're very excited about that. Another couple hundred shows and we're going to be right there. So it'll be really good.
Well, we've got a special guest today because, you know, on the Remote Show, we talk about the unique challenges and opportunities of working from home, working remotely in the tech industry. And we have Brittany Hodak, who I actually worked with at experience.com when she was the chief experience officer there. And she has written a book called Creating Superfans that we're going to talk about today, especially in the context of remote work and the employee experience, which is we've talked a little bit about how important that is in the workplace and particularly how leaders need to think about the remote workforce. So let's bring on Brittany.
There's Miss Brittany in the bottom, depending on where you're looking, the bottom left. And if you're listening on the podcast, then you can't see her, so it doesn't matter. So,
hey guys, I'm stoked to be
Hello.
here.
hi.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on our 100th show. So, Michael, this worked out. We have a special guest. It's our 100th show, and we're going to talk about Superfans. And just to be clear, because we have to help David with this, is not a big fan that cools you down. When he first heard this, he got very excited that he was going to get now a big fan that was going to keep him cool in the summertime. And we had to explain to him was how to turn a consumer into a super fan or an evangelist for your company. And then he nodded off, but that's okay. So don't take that the wrong way. So,
well,
I read your book and I thought it was fascinating.
To be honest, Stephen, you know, I'm now totally outnumbered, but I thought it was a very American thing. So, you know, like this whole super fan thing and Super Bowl and everything else. So, yeah, I'm intrigued. I know everybody else has read your book, Brittany, and they've been raving about it. I haven't, so I'm interested to know, maybe you can tell us about why you wrote the book in the first place.
Well, I wrote the book because I think customer experience is one of the most overlooked aspects of businesses. And, you know, sometimes people think customer experience is the same thing as customer service, which it's not, or they think that it's something that's just the job of people who work in call centers or maybe the person ringing someone up at retail, and it isn't. So I wanted to write a book that not only would serve as a roadmap for people who wanted to improve the customer experience of their brands, but also to make it fun. I wanted to write a book that even people who don't read books would want to read. So I tried to sort of practice what I preach in making a book that didn't feel like you were reading a business book, but more like you were just having a conversation with a fun friend who was making lots of pop culture references and trying to like update you on some things that you should know about.
Okay. And you built an entertainment industry or music industry startup prior to the book, long before the book, and some of those learnings came into the book. So, can you tell us about how your experience as a startup entrepreneur actually led to parts of the foundation of this Creating Superfans?
Yeah, absolutely. So I launched my first company when I was 26. It was the end of 2010. It was an idea that I'd had in college that I'd been trying to sort of find a home for within other organizations. And after 3 different companies sort of didn't let me run with it, I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to have to do this myself. So I launched a company called Zine Pack. And at the time, we were making these magazine packages to help launch big albums at Walmart. So Walmart was our very first corporate customer. We had the privilege of working on album launches for pretty much every celebrity in the world. I mean, Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, Justin Bieber, you name it, every country artist on the planet, basically. And so what I realized as we were doing more and more of these packages was our secret sauce, kind of our uniqueness, was creating something for these super fans, not the casual fan who's like, yeah, I'll just stream it on Spotify, but somebody who really felt the need to go deeper and be closer with the artist that they love. And so I got really fascinated about what turns someone into a super fan. Can you take a casual fan and turn them into a super fan? Or is somebody either predisposed to be a super fan or not? I got really interested in sort of the psychographics of it. So I went back to grad school. I got a master's in marketing and consumer behavior. And I really wanted to learn if the things that I had seen working in the entertainment industry my entire career, where people would become, diehard loyal fans of artists, if those same principles, if those same sort of behavioral markers would hold up in the world of brands and businesses. And have found, the spoiler alert, but I found over the past decade, they absolutely do. And anyone, whether you're running a brand new startup or you're in charge of a, global beloved 100-year-old brand, you can use the principles of creating super fans to help you create more engaged, more loyal customers who are not only going to come back, but are going to tell their friends to do the same.
And do you want to describe Superfandom briefly for us, and even talk about, I mean, David makes a good point. Is this a concept that's just American, or is this something that can be used more broadly?
This is absolutely not just an American phenomena. There are super fans all across the globe. I mean, David, I would say you look at Harry Styles, who is beloved not just in his homeland but all around the world. Adele, obviously, so many more. But not just in the entertainment world. I mean, look at Zara. Look at so many of the brands that you have that people are so passionate about. What I define as a super fan is somebody whose experience with your brand, whatever the product or services that you're selling, is so positive that they're going to become an enthusiastic advocate. They'll continue to choose you at the exclusion of others and make sure that their friends know about you when given the opportunity to share.
So it's like that T-Mobile dialogue we had when you told Brittany was coming on and talk about a super fan, where I went on a diatribe for like 20 minutes on how great T-Mobile was. Or guys that like Porsches or Lamborghinis over whatever supercar, or certain cigars or scotch. You can see where my interests go. But anyway, so that's kind of it. It's like I have friends that will, like the guys we just had on. There's a certain cigar, we all like it, and that's our go-to to cigar. We'll smoke others, but there's that go-to, or it's a car. Like I know friends of mine, they only drive Porsches. Doesn't matter. It's the only thing they're going to drive. So it's the same thing. You become a super fan because it's the customer service. It's the experience. It's like you go to Hermes and you spend $1,000 on a scarf that some Chinese kid made for $6, but it's that whole experience. It's the white glove experience. And I think that's what people don't understand about what the super fan is. It's not just like, oh, I bought this and it's durable, but it was A through Z. The whole experience from the time I first walked in to 5 years down the road when I had a problem. And I think that's what people don't understand, that's what you're trying to create. Or that's what it's about.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong because I've been
Exactly.
drinking heavily this morning.
Maybe I was just, been looking at it in a slightly, more traditional way, I think, because I would always say to people that I was doing sales training with, it's a bit of a, shall we say, a birthday party moment. When people get really enthusiastic about something, either it's a gift they've been given or something that they just experienced. And then they utilize about it. So, oh, this is great. You should do this. You should buy that. Is that the beginning of being a super fan, Brittany, do you think?
It absolutely can be. So I think the points Stephen made are spot on. We are no longer living in a world where it's just about the product or the service. We're living in an experience economy. Experience is everything. And when it comes down to it, everything is experience, every touch point, every interaction. So yes, David, that can absolutely be the jumping off point, but super fans are created at all parts of the journey. And really, it can happen at any time. So I always say that superfans are connected at the intersection of your brand story and every customer story. So where those two worlds collide, because I think the absolute biggest threat that every business faces today is apathy. It's not that people don't know about your brand. It's just they don't care because you haven't given them a reason to. You haven't showcased why you're different than all of your competitors and why you deserve that loyalty. And when you can showcase that, you overpower that apathy. Sometimes that's in the first purchase, sometimes that's in a subsequent purchase, sometimes that's before somebody's made a purchase at all, when they're just sort of beginning to look for your category. They've just sort of realized that they have a problem that you can serve. So overpowering that apathy and connecting your story to your customers is where Superfans are created. And that can happen at any point in the journey.
It's interesting,
But
the word
when you say
apathy,
that-
you know, because I mean, that's an enormous obstacle to get across. Yeah, apathetic client, because most people just consume, and they consume for the want of that point in time. And you're talking about, you know, like not only consuming, but you know, you becomes almost like an apostle to the gospel according to that brand. That's how are you going to stimulate people to reach that point?
Well, I have a 5-part framework that I talk about in my book, which I know you haven't read, David, but it walks people through everything that they need to do to take someone from just sort of curious about the brand to a loyal, engaged advocate.
But if you go back, and because, you know, we're the old farts, right? So we can go back this far. But if you go back to like 150, even 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, because the world was a little different, you had to make everyone a super fan, right? Because it wasn't 24-hour media. You didn't have a phone that when I walk into a mall, all of a sudden I get 9,000 advertisements that want people want to be my new best friend. So I think somewhere in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, I think we lost that. So and when I read your book, I chuckled to myself because I remember as a kid growing up way back when, you would go into a store and they treated everybody with kid gloves, and it was like the experience. And I think there's a generation, like I said, the 80s and 90s, and just say until yesterday, that lost that. And I think the certain brands didn't, like the Porsches and the Hermes and whatever, they certainly didn't. But other brands just didn't care. And I think they're realizing now that social media, if you don't do something right and you don't treat people with kid gloves, they're going to trash you. And if you screw the wrong person and they trash you and they have 10 million followers, that will hurt you more than any advertisement you're going to put out in the Financial Times or the Economist or whatever, where people go, "Oh, that's nice." So I think that may have a lot to do with it. And then the super fans that I notice, they like me, like I'm a T-Mobile fan forever, but I noticed when people, they'll put out a video and they're like, "Oh, they're so wonderful. They were so nice at the," it's like, oh, okay. So it makes you, even if you've never heard of the brand, like, I want to go check it out. I want to go see what it's all about. And I think we live in a very interesting society today where everything is instantaneous. It's 24/7. And if you make one mistake, you get crucified. That I don't agree with, but I understand the premise behind it. So I think the super fan is just taking things from, say, 100 years ago and bringing them back. And I guess you learn that with Walmart and the entertainment industry, because Walmart's 100 years old. So there you go.
Yeah, well, and it goes back even further than that. I joke in the book that, the first sort of instance of word of mouth marketing proving to be incredibly effective was when Adam took a bite of the forbidden fruit because Eve said,
Right.
"Hey, this is awesome," right? So this has been a very effective strategy for a very long time. And one of the stories that is in the book, which is actually in the foreword that was written by a guy named Shep Hyken, who I love very dearly, who is one of the sort of old, I was going to say old school, but that's not right. He's an OG. He's been doing it for a really long time, talking about customer service and customer experience. And he shares a story about what is the oldest known customer complaint letter. And it's almost 4,000 years old. It's in the British Museum.
I
It was
saw that.
carved in like a clay tablet in cuneiform and sent by a disgruntled customer across the desert by camel on messengers to complain to his copper ore vendor about the service that he received. And, you're right that social media has changed everything, but it's also kind of changed nothing. It's like people are still the same, behaviors are still the same, expectations are still the same, if not higher. But what has changed is exactly what you said. When something goes wrong, everyone around the world can hear about it in 10 seconds versus having to, chisel a complaint letter into clay and send it across the desert on a camel.
But
One of the
even back in the day, if something went wrong, like before, let's just say 1980, when things started to go different, like if something went wrong, the only people that knew would be one, you type a letter and that would be on a typewriter. So you type a letter to the corporate office and they would go, nobody cares, and they rip it up. Your neighbors would know, and whoever you bump into that you were just going to blah, 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 blah. But now, like if I go out and have a bad lunch, and I don't do this because I have more important things to do with my time, but I could literally take my phone, go on Instagram or go on whatever and go, oh my, the worst, da, 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 da. And it's like, boom. And then and to me, that's very old school. Like, we're old school guys, right? I think you have to treat everybody like a human being. And I think that, like I said, from the 80s until let's just say a couple of years ago, companies forgot that. Certain ones didn't. And I think with social media, they all waking up. So I think for them reading this book, which is very pathetic, not reading the book, but for them reading the book and going, oh, that's a good idea. It's like, you're that stupid. You don't realize the customer first, the customer's right. You bend over backwards and that's just the way it goes. And I don't think a lot of them thought that way because, and now it's like, oh, wait, the customers are important. Before it was sort of like, take our product. If you don't like it, who cares? Kind of like a Ferrari mentality. If you don't like it, don't buy it. And now people don't. Now they're like, wait, we didn't mean that. So I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing, but it's very, in my view, book is great, love it. But I think it's pathetic that now corporate heads have to read a book that really is common sense. Does that make sense? And not in a bad way. Like I know the book is one, I love it. I would recommend it to everybody. And I have told people about it because I'm like, you need to read this book. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, you are the dumbest person in the world that I have to tell you to read this book because you should know this. You're not a moron. Apparently you are, but it's one of those things. So and I'm shocked by that. People just people don't read, but they understand. It's like, it's not that difficult. And your book at least explains that to them, which I'm like, they need this. But any job, whether you're a waitress or whatever luxury brand, Rolls-Royce, but Rolls-Royce treats you like, you're the best person in the world. So I don't know. They read your book.
Well, and I think it's, what I wanted to do was write a book that was accessible to everyone, whether you were the CEO or somebody just starting out. And you're right in that everything in the book is simple, right? Like none of this is rocket science, but it's not easy. And, one of the things that Michael and I have talked about a lot over the years is that there's always an experience. It's not like, is there going to be an experience or is there not going to be an experience? Is that experience going to be intentional or accidental? Is it one that's done by design or one that's sort of just by default that varies based on the person they interact with or the day or the time or the location? And so something, again, that Michael and I have spent a lot of time talking about over the years is this idea of intentionally designing the experience that you want every single customer to have with your brand. What is the promise that you're delivering on? What do you want them to say about their experience with you when they're talking to their friends? Because again, it all comes back to apathy. You said before, people can get online and say, oh, I had a terrible lunch. They can also get online and say, oh, I had this amazing experience. Very few people go online and are like, you know what? I just did this thing and it was okay. It was forgettable. Like it was a nothing burger, right? There are very few 3-star reviews relative to the 1s and the 2s and the 4s and the 5s, because when something's just average, it's unremarkable, right? We're not talking about it. We're not telling people. So this idea of not just doing enough, but doing enough to make an impression, to have someone say, wow, this is great, and want to talk about it is the way you get that edge and the way that you win. Because again, plenty of people will try something once and it's okay. And then they forget about it. And then the next time they need whatever that thing is, if it's easier for them to just get out their phone and Google and find somebody else who does it than it is to be like, wait, who was that company that I worked with before? What was this thing? They're probably going to roll the dice and try somebody new.
Well, and why don't you tell us about how this connects to employee experience? Because I think that concept is even newer in a sense, although it should go as far back as history, all of history. But
in the pyramids we use this.
And the pyramid, sure. I mean, the employee experience is what makes the customer experience. So why don't you tell us about how Superfandom plays into the employee experience?
Absolutely. Well, from what I know of history, I don't think the employees working on the pyramids had a very good experience.
They did
Uh,
not.
yes, they did not. So employee experience is so critical because it's the foundation upon which customer experience thrives, right? You will never create an engaged customer with an apathetic employee. You can't, it's impossible. It does not happen. Nobody has ever been like, oh, that was such an amazing experience. Like, I'm so glad that employee had a bad attitude and felt like they wanted to be somewhere else, right? So you've got to start with creating internal superfans before you can get external superfans. You've got to align everyone on your team around this intentional experience that you're creating, because ultimately everyone is in the experience department. No customer ever was like, oh, a different department messed that up, I'm not angry anymore, right? Nobody
Yeah.
ever was like, oh, that was somebody else's fault. My bad. Like, you're great. No, a customer just sees the company. And whether it's your first day on the job or you've been there 25 years, the moment you put on that name tag, whether it's a literal name tag or a metaphorical name tag, you represent the company, and all of your actions impact what they think of when they think of that company. And like, is it logical for somebody to base their opinion of an entire company that maybe has tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees based on one interaction? No, of course not. But that's what we do all the time, because that's the way people think. That's the way we operate. That's the way we make connections in our minds. So every employee is in the experience department. And again, you're either going to have an intentional experience or an accidental experience based on the training that you create and the tools that you provide for your employees. And this is something more relevant than ever before, as people have work independence and they're working from home or they're working from anywhere, making sure that they are so lockstep with what it is that your company wants the experience for their customers to be.
So how can
That would be more like Disney, right? Like what Disney used to be that way. I don't think Disney's that way anymore. We just went there and everybody, not the happiest place on earth. And Mickey was not happy. But it seems like Disney used to have that. Like everybody was happy, everybody was smiling, everybody was everything. And when you left Disney, you were like, "Ooh, they just took me for $3,000, but it was a good experience. I enjoyed it." Now they take you for 10 times more, and the employers are like grumpy, and it's like, "Dude, why are you grumpy?" Like, it's very interesting. But yeah, I agree with you on that. It's like the employee from the guy like Walmart that says, "Welcome," to the cashier. All that's your experience, and I don't think people realize that everybody has a rating system in their mind that's going to be part of your experience. And when they leave, they're going to be like, everybody was great, or 5 people out of the 7 were. Even at a restaurant, right? They're always smiling, they blah blah blah. And I don't think people realize that the employee side, the customers do, but then I think the employees forget that they're customers somewhere else.
Well, talking to leaders who are of remote or hybrid organizations, which is obviously post-COVID has been a huge trend, and we're seeing, at least in the tech industry, 20 or 30% of people working remotely, working from home. So if you were to speak to people who are leading remote or hybrid organizations, what do they need to know about building Superfan employees?
Well, one thing they need to know is that you've absolutely got to model the behavior that you want to see. You've got to treat your employees even better than you want them to treat your customers, because the way that they feel when they show up to work is going to impact the way that they interact with every single customer, every single vendor, every single partner, every single colleague, all of it. So again, it comes back to this idea of intentional experience design, asking yourself, how do I want my team to feel? And then behaving in accordance to the outcome that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's a really good start there. I mean, when we talked so Brittany and I have had many conversations about intentional experience design. And when we talk about that, it's just putting the intention into the experience that you want somebody to have, whether it's a customer or an employee or a colleague. So in a remote organization, now talking to the employees, how could someone who's a remote employee or a hybrid employee going to go the extra mile to make Superfans among their colleagues? Is that something that fits inside the Super framework?
Absolutely. And so the supermodel framework is start with your story, understand your customer story, personalize, exceed expectations, repeat. So
Mhm.
anybody who wants more on the supermodel, you can check it out in the book. What I'll say for remote employees is the same way that Stephen was saying, everything at that trip to Walmart is part of the experience. The same is true for remote employees, but it begins long before their first day. It begins when they're looking for a job. Like, what is their impression of your company? What are you doing to showcase your uniqueness, your differentiation, the reason your organization exists? All of that goes into someone deciding to apply at your organization or not. The way they're treated throughout the interview process. How many people do they
Mhm.
talk to? How long does it take for somebody to get back to them? How clear is the information? Are the expectations in alignment with the reality, all of those things. And then when somebody starts, when they do get the job, what are you doing to welcome them to the team? What are you doing to sort of set the expectations of how they're going to behave based on the way you treat them? Is it easy for people, especially in a remote environment, to understand where they need to go for the information that they
Mhm.
need? Do they have, let's say, a directory somewhere where they can see who their coworkers are so that they can have
Mhm.
pictures of their employees, and coworkers' faces so that they understand who's who and what they do and what's expected? Do you have an LMS built out for them to feel like they're an expert at your product? Do they have a resource library? Are they given adequate access to either their direct supervisor or somebody else on their team who's going to help them sort of make this transition from non-employee to employee in a way that gives them the confidence to perform at their job at the level that's expected, but also the sort of cultural
Yeah.
feeling of what it now means to be a part of this team and how working at this team is different than working, for any team that they've worked with before. So all of those things become so, so important when you're talking about remote workers, because if they're not often together with colleagues, you've got to just try that much harder for that sort of team mentality to come alive and that sort of uniqueness of your brand to really be felt by your employees, because ultimately every employee is your brand. The way
Mhm.
I said before, like every
Mhm.
interaction can make or break somebody's first sale or next sale with your company. So every single employee is your brand. You want to make damn sure that they're clear on what the brand is all about and how they play a part in this bigger goal that you're all working toward together.
Stephen talked a lot about that as a remote leader of a team of remote workers. I mean, Stephen, you brought up the importance of team many times on this show. So
Right.
yeah, this
No, but
this
it starts at the top though. But you know what I mean? Like you're the DNA of a company or whatever the new term is for the week. Um, so it starts at the top. So you have to your leaders just can't talk. They actually have to do. So the employee, and I don't care if it's the janitor, right, or whatever the lowest guy in the ring is, they have to see that, hey, that guy cares and he leads and he does. And that's part of the DNA. And I don't think a lot of companies have that anymore, right? It's all about we have to make money, we have to make money, we have to do this, be fast, be quick, be that. And I think employees see that. So when you come in as a consumer and they're like, we have to be fast, we have to be quick. No, no, no. Well, how can I help you? Like it's so like that's and I heard an actor say this once, and he said, every time I meet somebody, even if it's the 100th time a fan comes up to me, it's their first time with me. And that means everything to them. He says, so I treat everybody like it's the first time I'm meeting them. Even though you're the 100th person in line, I treat you like you were the first person. And I think if companies start doing that, like, even though you keep coming back and they treat people like that, it would make it a lot easier. So hopefully they read the book or at least look at the pictures. No, David, there were no pictures. Just big fans that keep you cool. And I think that would help. But like you talk about, like Disney, like I said, used to be where everybody was like, oh my God, and customer this and customer that. Now Disney's sort of like, yeah, what do you want to go this way? Which is kind of sad. So, because that used to be like, I think the benchmark that people would be like, you go to Disney and you learn how to customer service and this and that. So I think it's changing, and the airlines definitely should be reading your book because most of them just suck. So when it comes to customer service, and in the remote work, it's all about, like, we have team calls with our remote teams, and you have to be, as the leader, positive So they're positive. And if there's something eating them, I believe you need to have a dialogue with them. Like, what's wrong? How do we make it better? If you're not happy, then you should leave. But if it's something we're doing, how do we make you happy? So, but I also, that starts at the very top and it starts dwindling down. So the people that are managing the remote team know if there's a problem, how to deal with it. And I don't think a lot of companies do that. I think they spend a lot of time on algorithms and chat IGP, MOUSE, and all this other crap, but they don't really look at the interpersonal. How do I keep my employee happy, which translate, how do I keep my customer happy? And I don't think they think like that anymore. I think they just think, you need me, screw you, good luck.
One of the issues, of course, is that companies have their first necessity is, oh, I need to employ somebody. They're very basic. Oh, I need something. So it's their need. And a lot of companies lack the ability to communicate that need is an employee, and that employee, as Brittany very eloquently has been telling us, is your brand ambassador. And a lot of people that I hear all these stories from people around me, and they're all bitching about this, that, and the other, about the places where they work. And I just think to myself, well, there's just something here fundamentally wrong, because the message is not necessarily the fact that these people are bitching about where they're working. It's just that the way they talk about the companies that they work for seems to me that they're missing something really fundamental. It's never really been explained to them that the customers they're trying to service are actually the lifeblood of that company. It's the customer that pays their wages.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to be this sort of disconnect between, oh, we have a need, we need another pair of hands, let's employ somebody, bang, chuck them in the shop, put them on the phone, because we keep getting all these telephone calls, we can't answer them. And it never ceases to amaze me when people, the way that they react in their work. Oh yeah, this or that, or so. Well, just that very action itself, could cost you a client, and that client will eventually pay your wages. And if your company's not successful that you're working for, you're unemployed. But that message just doesn't seem to be, filtering through. I hope very much that Brittany's book is a bestseller. I think I'm going to have to read it myself now, which is also a plus point. But outside of that, joking apart, I just think it's really important that if people don't have an understanding that we're in this sort of domino business world that we live in, that when you fall, eventually the client will fall at the end. And there's no way back from that.
Well, Brittany, does that connect to the idea that the leaders of an organization need to intersect the company's story with the employee's story? And is that one of the solutions that you're recommending in the book to make sure that employees get the message and understand where they fit in the whole corporate ecosystem?
It absolutely is, because what happens if you don't have an employee who's able to internalize the brand story and understand where they fit into it and retell it in one intentionally designed voice that is, in chorus with everybody else at the company, the exact same thing happens inside the company as outside the company, which is apathy. It becomes just a paycheck, not a purpose, and maybe you could say, oh, there's, people aren't going to always find purpose in every single job, and maybe not, but you know what? They can find passion, but they're not going to find that passion if you haven't inspired it by showcasing what it is that, why you exist, like what it is that your business does better and different than everyone else, and why it's so critical to have them do their part as part of this company. So yes, apathy inside the organization is even more detrimental and even more dangerous than apathy outside the organization, because while it's true that your customers, give you their money, your employees give you something far more valuable. And that, of course, is their time. So you've got to treat them as, the wonderful, contributors they are to everything that it's only possible to do because they're there giving of their time and their talents and their resources to be a part of this bigger mission.
So in a nutshell, how would you wrap up and say, what philosophical shift you would want to inspire in the workplace with the Superfans book, with creating Superfans. What shift would
Wait, I have one. I have one that we use where we work. Until the attitudes change, the beatings continue. Can we use that? No, that's not a good tagline, probably. I'm just saying, because back when we built the pyramid, that's what we used, and they loved it. Everyone was smiling and happy. So yeah, that's probably not a good tagline for this, though.
I think the biggest takeaway, well, there's two. One is that we're living in this experience economy. It's no longer just about the product or the service that you sell. It's about the entire experience from start to finish. And also this idea of customer centricity. You've really got to put your customers in the middle of all of the decisions that you make. And if you do that, if you keep your customer front and center in your thoughts, in your decision making, in everything that your employees are shown and told to do, put that customer first, and that is a customer who will last.
Nice.
I agree with all of that.
Yeah.
Mine's a little more radical, I guess. Change your attitude. And
I mean, we basically
I understand why that's a problem. Yeah, it's just you were more poetic about it, I think. Yeah. So, well, this is, guys, thank you so much. We know Brittany's busy. She's promoting her book. I do know your book is at Barnes & Noble because I actually read. I know it's at Barnes & Noble. It just got there a couple weeks ago. Superfans is the book. I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's on Amazon because everything's on Amazon.
It is, yes. Well, this is a customer experience book, so it's only fitting that people can choose to get it however they want. It is available in bookstores, and on Amazon, you can find the beautiful hardcover version that's got not pictures, but lots of fun graphics and iconography throughout. So, David, hopefully that's like partial credit on the pictures that you want. You can also get the Audible version or the ebook version. So, however you want to learn about turning your customers into lifelong advocates, I got you covered.
We got the ebook version and we got to read that. So that was, like I said, it was very cool. I loved it. I read it and I chuckled through the whole thing because I was just like, seriously? People don't know this? So, but then again, David and I were around before Lincoln. So, and the earth cooling, we were here for that. So
it needs to be said in different ways. And now we've got a great book to do it. So thank you so much, Brittany.
And she's poetically.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Brittany, thank you so much for your time this morning. David, do you have a cool ending?
Guys.
There's always a cool ending to my. It's always a cool ending to my.
Cool ending. Is this a new cool ending?
Yeah, this is the new ending. I think it works.
I love discussing the world of remote work and how to be the best remote worker in the digital age, and I want you to be a part of it. If you have a particular topic you'd like to discuss, email me at michael@bendicoot.com. That's BENDICOOT.com. See you next time. All right, see you next time.
Hold on, guys. And we'll be out in 2 seconds. David gets mad until I put our production company name up, which is pretty funny. And then we're done. Oh, there is no production company name. Way to go, Dave. Now I'm